speech difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Marge Lover, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the current issues of the Dunkirk Observer on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And the first issue we're reading from is from Friday, July 24th. And the editor has a comment that's John DiAugustino. And he says, such a much-needed control board is not part of the current equation. The city of Dunkirk is banking on a new controller to better steer the fiscal condition for the municipality. In taking the newly created position, this month, Tracy Smith Dangler will be compensated $140,000 per year. With the entity being strapped for cash, that figure has ruffled some feathers. Before the salary was made public, Common Council member Gary Frederickson from the 3rd Ward was the lone no vote on the position after he couldn't get a response on the salary. It seemed that nobody in this building, he said in May, was able to give me what I thought should be a relatively simple answer to a question: how much are we going to pay this controller per year? Serving for more than 2 decades, the city woefully underpaid and received an unqualified treasurer who was elected by residents. His salary was between $41,500 and $42,298 per year over the last 15 years. For that sum of money, Mark Woods was in charge of handling all the cash for an entity that was a multi-million-dollar operation. His charges of corruption and the theft of $120,000 of city funds, and possibly more, came to light in January of this year. What Woods earned remains the trend in local governments. Big bucks go to those who often put their lives on the line for the residents they serve as members of the police and fire departments, not the managers. Consider the 25 highest paid employees in 2025, the city of Dunkirk. 24 of these were in the police or fire departments. So in other news, there's an investigation into the shooting of the UPC parking lots closed in Jamestown. The investigation to a shooting near UPMC Chautauqua on Wednesday afternoon revealed 2 people each died as a result of apparent self-inflicted gunshot wounds. Jamestown police issued an update about 1 p.m. Thursday. Officers responded to the hospital at 2:10 p.m. Wednesday for a report of 2 unresponsive individuals in a vehicle in the parking lot of the emergency department. Upon arrival, it was determined that the 2 victims were deceased. Because the wounds appear to be self-inflicted, the Jamestown Police Department said in a statement, there is no criminal investigation in the matter. There is no threat to the public, and the names of the victims will not be released at this time. There was a heavy police presence around the hospital for much of the afternoon, with traffic blocked on Prather Avenue with Foot Avenue to Sherman Street, and the entrance to the hospital's emergency room was also blocked. And then there was another incident. An inmate was killed in the Collins Correctional Facility. In Collins, an inmate in a Western New York facility has apparently been killed by a fellow inmate. So according to state police, this is on Tuesday about 11 p.m. This is, so it was a few days before the 24th, so it was probably the 22nd. There was altercation at Collins Correctional Facility. It resulted in the death of an incarcerated individual. The preliminary investigation revealed that an incarcerated individual attacked a second incarcerated individual and a residential rehabilitation unit, resulting in serious physical injury. So the incarcerated victim was sent to Bertrand Chaffee Hospital and pronounced dead after life-saving measures were taken. The victim has been identified as Jose Aponte, age 34, and the age of the other inmate wasn't released. So we'll go on to our next observer, which is from Saturday, Sunday, July 25th and 26th. So there was no easy answers, and Lighthouse's crumbling bluff raises concern. The bluff of the Dunkirk Lighthouse and Veteran Museum is crumbling. If nothing's done, the lighthouse could literally fall into the lake. So what solutions are there? There are some, but all seem to be quite expensive and will take a lot of work. During the Chautauqua County Legislature meeting, lawmakers agreed to help the lighthouse apply for a $50,000 grant to see what solutions could be found. During a recent legislative meeting, Dave McCoy from the county's Department of Planning and Development discussed the situation. He said, "I think most of you are familiar with the Dunkirk Lighthouse and Veterans Museum as a great piece of history on Dunkirk's waterfront. It is unfortunately on a bluff that is crumbling into the lake, and someday it will be in the lake if there aren't corrective measures taken," he said. So legislator John Penlow, a Republican from Stockton, asked McCoy what are the long-term options, and McCoy replied that there's three realistic options. One is to move the lighthouse, which they're not thrilled about, and I get that, he said. Second would be to stabilize the bluff, which would be a very intensive geotechnical event. You'd be drilling and tunneling and whatnot, McCoy said. The third option, McCoy said, would be doing something out in the lake to attenuate the waves. He admits that all three options are quite costly and difficult to do. So McCoy said they want to get this grant to help them decide which is the best option. So Dave Briska with the Dunkirk Lighthouse and Veterans Park Museum said they have been working on this issue for a few years now. He said there are several spots where the ground has just been eaten away with all of the bad storms that we've had, he said. The lighthouse's tower is about 50 feet from the edge of the cliff. There's concern that eventually the tower is going to be too close to the edge of the cliff and end up being destroyed. So Ferguson echoed another news. Hochul's wariness on data centers. Well, Fredonia Mayor Michael Ferguson has echoed New York Governor Kathy Hochul's cautious approach to large-scale data centers. Ferguson told the Village Board of Trustees that he participated in a Hochul roundtable discussion Monday afternoon about the centers. Hochul just announced a year-long moratorium on a state regulatory approval of new data centers. They're popping up, Ferguson said. This came up when we had the windmill issue, then we had the solar farm issue, and now data centers and hyperspeed data centers are being part of the mix. Ferguson mentioned Hochul's moratorium and offered an example from the days of the windmill boom to buttress his case for caution. If you remember back when the windmill issue began, New York State put 4 of those windmills on our toll booth steps, he said, noting that one was erected at the Fredonia exit. Within about 4 months, they broke. The company in France that created them went out of business and no one's ever been able to fix it. So my discussion today is, know who you're working with. Ferguson continued, I have a double-edged sword with regards to how I feel about AI technology. I think it's the future and foreign countries are outpacing us. But I don't think you want to get in bed with people who aren't prepared to run this. We had a lot of people who chipped in, bought themselves a windmill company years ago, and suddenly you're looking at windmills that haven't worked in many, many years or they fell apart. And in this issue, we also have some deaths to report. We have Frederick Larson from Fredonia passed away on July 22nd. Christopher John Pardee, he had passed away on April 4th. Christopher Convert, they're having a memorial for him on August 8th from 2 to 4. They're going to serve lunch too. It's going to be at Brockton American Legion. Dorothy Donkers passed away on June 24th. Anne-Marie Stoll, or Matronowski, of Hopkinsville, Kentucky. She was born in Dunkirk. She passed away on, July 4th. Kirk Lombardo, known as Boom Boom and Captain, passed away. He had a brief illness, and that was on June 4th. And in another news, we have Purina is helping the 4-H series of programs for dog-loving youth. And Sherman, have you ever seen a dog spin in midair to catch a flying frisbee or navigate a complicated pattern of obstacles on an agility course and thought, how did they train their dogs to do that? Dog Sports Day is your answer. Cornell Cooperative Extension of Chautauqua County 4-H is proud to announce Dog Sports Day, The event will be hosted at the K9 Complex at 123 Prospect Street in Sherman on August 1st from 2 to 4 p.m. This event is free and geared for youth in grades kindergarten to 12, even those who are not currently 4-H members. Please leave your dog at home to reduce distractions to our demo dogs. And we'll move on to our July 27th edition, which was Monday. So, Mayor Ferguson defends and explains the parking law plan. Mayor Michael Ferguson defended Fredonia's proposed parking law and tried to clear up misconceptions about it at the recent Board of Trustees meeting. The law would start a paid permit structure for long-term parking in the municipal lots and charge metered spaces to a mobile app system. The board scheduled a public hearing on the law, but then canceled the hearing. So Ferguson made a series of comments about the proposed law after a critical letter from former village attorney Samuel Dreo was read out. So Dreo wrote, "The proposed new parking system is far from being user-friendly. The present procedure is very simple. You put a quarter in the meter, which is immediately joining your parking space, and you get a half-hour parking time. Under the proposed new system, you'll need to follow the directions on the signage and use a credit card to make payment for the parking space." So there's an unexpected gift. In other news, Western Division donates $5K to Boys and Girls Club. So the Western Divisional Credit Union has made a point to strengthen the bonds it has within its communities all through Western New York. One way it chose to do so is by supporting local boys and girls clubs, and Dunkirk Club was one of the beneficiaries. Representatives of Western Division recently brought a giant check and bags full of branded materials to the Boys and Girls Club of Northern Chautauqua County to support the club's programming this summer. The donation amounted to $5,000, and in delivering the check, Sylvette Rodriguez, Western Division's marketing specialist, and Christy Skelly, supervisor of Western Division's Fredonia location, got to meet some of the children who will benefit from this generosity. Rather than the Boys and Girls Club reaching out to Western Divisions to build a relationship, it was Western Divisions who contacted the club out of the blue with a desire to support the youth and the community. Western Division also has built relationships with boys and girls clubs in the Buffalo area. It was really cool that they reached out to us, said Kate Dawson, executive director of the Boys and Girls Club of Northern Chautauqua County. To even think of us, because we're local, is nice. The donation will support the Boys and Girls Club's exciting opportunities planned throughout the summer for its children. 3 field trips will take place this summer, including a Buffalo Bisons game, a trip to the Erie Zoo, and a visit to Penn-Dixie Fossil Park and Nature Preserve. The club is also holding themed weeks this summer, focusing on life skills, team building, and scholarly activities. Various career paths that staff members and volunteers affiliated with the club have pursued aside from what they do at the club. The final week of summer will wrap up at Wrights Park, where children will receive catered lunches as they play on the playground and splash pad. As a new donor to the club, Western Division helps expand the reach of the club to its members and staff. It expands our overall level of outreach, Dawson said. The more partners we have, the more we can serve the community. And then we have some local world news here. And the U.S. In Cairo, the United States pauses attacks on Iran for a second straight day. That was Sunday, and Tehran said it had done so too, as efforts continue to bring the countries back to negotiations on an interim ceasefire, deal largely undermined by recent exchanges of fire. It was not clear why the U.S. has paused after targeting Iranian coastal areas and infrastructure in a nearly 2-week escalation sparked by Iran's firing its ships trying to transmit the Strait of Hormuz. The Pentagon did not immediately respond to questions Sunday. President Donald Trump has always been consistent in saying he prefers a diplomatic solution, but he continues to retain all options if Iran continues. Terrorist activities in the Strait of Hormuz are against allies. White House Communications Director Stephen Chang said, adding, it would be wise for Iran to work towards a negotiated deal. Otherwise, they know what will happen. Since the U.S. halted attacks for the past 2 nights, Iran has had as well. Its army spokesperson told Iran State TV on Sunday, Tehran in recent days has counterattacked against countries in the region hosting U.S. military forces, killing at least 3 at a base in Jordan. Well, so we do have some a death to report here, 2 of them. Jean Lembeck, who passed away on October 22nd. They're going to have a celebration of life for her on August 8th at the Casadego Fire Hall at 2 o'clock. And then Kevin Schmidt, at 61 at Fredonia, passed away on July 25th. So there's wildfires in France. They drive 250,000 people from their homes and creep towards wine country city of Bordeaux. And Le Cap Ferret, France, a raging wildfire in southwest France forced the evacuation of 55,000 people overnight Sunday, bringing the total forced out of their homes to a staggering 220,000 in one region alone, as flames crept even closer to the wine region city of Bordeaux. Neighboring Spain oversaw its own fire evacuations on the country's east coast. Shifting, disgusting winds and air conditions complicated massive efforts to limit the spread of the monster blaze that has burned out of control since midweek in France and their Gironde region, where Bordeaux is located. Authorities issued overnight evacuation orders for 5 or more localities southwest of the historic city. The situation remains very unfavorable, French Interior Minister Laurent Noël said, after what he described as another difficult night for fire crews battling around the clock against a blaze that has burned an area 4 times the size of Paris. The fire again became extremely virulent again and unpredictable, generating its own winds and advancing erratically toward the Bordeaux metropolitan area, he said. It became calmer by the end of the night, the minister added. So at the end of his Sunday Angelus prayer, Pope Leo referenced the devastating wildfires in France and Spain and said, I express my solidarity and invite everyone to pray for those affected and for the work of the rescue workers. By Sunday morning, an estimated 42,000 acres have burned in Gironde, the region's prefecture said. Much of its forest and scrubland made tinder by successive heat waves. That is 7 times the area of Manhattan Island and 4 times the size of Paris. Firefighters raced in trucks to fight flare-ups and planes to drop water and retardants rotated in the smoke-filled area. The number of firefighters mobilizing crew grew to 2,500, backed by 18 planes and helicopters, including from other European nations. Soldiers have also been called in, and a giant A400M military cargo aircraft has been converted for firefighting, will also be used against the fire, the minister said. On Saturday, it swooped low over arid, fire-threatening woodlands to drop a long plume of ochre-colored retardant. Poor people in France. And in other news, first you're listening to reading articles and features from the Dunkirk Observer on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And Israel is detaining over 70 suspects following deadly violence in the West Bank. So in the West Bank, Israel's military said to detain over 70 suspects across the occupied West Bank overnight and on Saturday, a day after troops deployed across the territory following violence that left 2 Israeli soldiers and 4 Palestinian villagers dead. Soldiers remained in the village of Tel and the northern West Bank, where Friday's clashes were centered. Palestinians described searches that included raids of a hospital in the city of Nablus, one of the territory's most violent areas. Palestinians in the West Bank have faced violence as Israel's hardline government, dominated by settler leaders and supporters, has overseen a surge in settlement construction over the past 4 years. The international community overwhelmingly considers the Israeli settlement construction illegal and an obstacle to peace. Dear Lord, they're always fighting over there, aren't they? So the Waterfront Foundation is going to hold an inaugural 5K run and a walk. The Waterfront Foundation will be holding its inaugural 5K fundraiser The Waterfront 5K Run and Walk takes place Saturday, August 8th at Wright Park in Dunkirk. The 5K Run and Walk. The 5K race will run on the existing Marauder Trotter 5K course beginning in Dunkirk Wright Park. The course continues on the walkway next to Lake Erie, past the pier, loops around Dunkirk Memorial Park, and follows the walkway back to the Wright Park finish line. The Chautauqua Striders Runner of the Year program participants get a 10% discount. However, the race does not give ROTY points at this time. The walk in support of the Waterfront Foundation will kick off at the same time and follow the same path. There will be a live DJ and basket raffle as part of the festivities. Dunkirk Wright Park is located at 198 Lakefront Boulevard, Dunkirk. Sign in and final registration for the 5K will begin at 8 a.m. with the official race beginning at 9. The cost is $25 plus $2.75 in fees for runners and walkers. And in this issue, we have some area police things to report in Jamestown. Tony Mosley, 34, Jamestown, was charged with second-degree criminal mischief and second-degree assault. So at about 11:12 p.m. on Saturday, officers responded to 207 Foote Avenue for a disorderly subject. Through an investigation, it was found that Mosley assaulted a staff member and caused thousands of dollars of damage to hospital equipment. He was placed into custody without incident and transported to Jamestown City Jail. And then a pair of individuals are facing charges after being located inside a condemned house. Terry Galletti, 44, was charged with first-degree criminal contempt and third-degree criminal trespass, while Leonard Wilson, 64, was charged with third-degree criminal trespass. So at about 8:10 p.m. Friday, officers responded to a condemned house on the south side of Jamestown for a reported trespass. And upon arrival, officers located Galante and Wilson in a condemned structure. Both were placed into custody without incident. Then they were transported to City Jail, where they awaited arraignment in Jamestown City Court. And the Chautauqua County's Department, in Harmony, at about 1:26 p.m. Saturday, deputies came across a suspicious situation on Button Valley Road. Through an investigation, Stephen Foster, 30, of Corey, was found to have warrants out of the state of Pennsylvania. Foster was transported to Chautauqua County Jail and charged with being a fugitive of justice. He was held in jail pending his extradition back to Pennsylvania. And then at Sherman, at approximately 1:59 a.m. Saturday, deputies with the Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office responded to an address in the village for a report of an unwanted person. Through investigation, it was determined that Heather Ramsey, 45, of Sherman, had made unwanted physical contact with another person during an altercation. Ramsey was issued an appearance ticket and will be in the town of Mena court later. And then in Portland, at 4:05 p.m. Saturday, deputies responded to an address for an alleged order of protection violation. Through an investigation, it was found that 39-year-old Jacob Tai of Fredonia did violate a valid stay-away order of protection. Tai was later located and charged with second-degree criminal contempt. Tai was transported to the Chautauqua County Jail to participate in the centralized arraignment program. So there was a New York City stabbing suspect. He was arrested on a hate crime. So a suspect in two separate stabbings of New York City streets was arrested Friday on attempted murder and charged with hate crimes relating to both victims, a Jewish man and an Asian man. Raul Morales, 51, allegedly yelled the Arabic phrase, Allah Akbar, while attacking the two men Thursday on Manhattan's Upper West Side, according to police accounts of what witnesses told them. So Morales was initially arrested Friday on a hate crime charge related to the Jewish man, but not the other. He was arraigned later that day and charged with attempted murder and assault as hate crimes related to both victims. So as Morales was let out of a police station Friday, he shouted about seeking justice for someone. When reporters asked about the stabbings, he responded that he was going to talk about it, and he was ushered into a police car. So Morales' court-appointed attorney did not immediately respond to an emailed request for comment late Friday. The stabbings happened about 2 blocks apart Thursday afternoon, police said, and both victims were taken to a hospital and were expected to survive. Thank God for that. Let's see what we have going on in town. I think everything was already passed. So we're going to skip that, and we're going to go into our next issue, which is on Tuesday, July 24th, or 28th, I'm sorry, 28th. So the annual vintage book sale show was on Sunday, August 1st, okay? May in Mayville. Those with an interest in history are welcome to return to the annual Chautauqua Region Vintage Book and Paper Show as it makes its way to Chautauqua Suites at the beginning of August. Held on the first Sunday of August every year, this year's show and sale is set for August 2nd from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at Chautauqua Suites, 215 West Lakes Road, Route 394. And over 30 dealers will be in attendance this year, dealing with a variety of historical paper and print artifacts. Let's see what else we have here. We do have some obituaries to talk about. There was a Kevin Schmidt, and Kevin Schmidt passed away. He was only 61 at July 25th. Janice Carol, her last name used to be Strombo Ortel, 84 of South Dayton, passed away on July 26th. Alexander Fugelitz of Stockton passed away on July 26th. Norman Sager of Silver Creek passed away on the 23rd of July. So there's a grand jury indicted a Jamestown man in a deadly mace stabbing in Jamestown. A Jamestown man has been charged in a mace stabbing death in the area of Lakeview Avenue and 8th Street. A secret indictment issued by the Chautauqua County Grand Jury was unsealed in Chautauqua County Court, charging 27-year-old Robert Brinkley with second-degree murder, first-degree manslaughter, and third-degree criminal possession of a weapon, and the May 3rd death of Jamestown resident Tori Kenny, who was 32. Chautauqua County District Attorney Jason Schmidt called the incident a brutal and predatory attack committed without justification. Kenny was unarmed and fearing for his life when he was stabbed through the eye and collapsed on the street during the early morning hours of May 3rd. Within minutes of the call, Jamestown police began their investigation with very little evidence and information from the crime scene, and devoted countless hours from then on developing the case until we were confident that it was ready for prosecution. Wow. Blakely pleaded not guilty to the charges, and a conference has been scheduled for August 17th. County Court Judge David Foley set bail at $1 million cash, or in the alternative, $2 million to be secured by property bond or the posting of 10%. If convicted, Brinkley faces a prison sentence of between 25 years and life. Wow. So there's a national night out that's planned for August 4th. The Dunkirk Police Department will hold its National Night Out on Tuesday, August 4th at 6 p.m. in Washington Park. This year will again include both the Dunkirk Police and Fire Departments. Foods and drinks will be available for everyone to enjoy. Music will be provided by the Footsteps. There will also be free car seat inspections available. Please note that each inspection will take approximately 20 minutes to complete. Car seat inspections will take place on Washington Avenue between East 5th and East 6th Street. Please enter Washington Avenue from East 6th Street and exit on East 5th Street when having your car seat inspected. The department would like to thank sponsors Blaisdell Pizza, Tops Friendly Markets, RoboMart, Save-A-Lot, G&E Tents, Atlas Comfort Cabins, Awesome Bouncers, Basil Fredonia, Tim Hortons, Imagine the Custom Products Incorporated, Cartoons, Dollar General, and Walmart. Please come down to help celebrate and foster the positive relationship between the police and the community they serve. The police said, "We hope to see you there." we're going to go up to our next issue. But first of all, you've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Dunkirk Observer on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. So this is from Wednesday, July 29th. The village vendor disputes bubbles up again. Fredonia's long-running dispute about vendors was on display again this week at the Board of Trustees workshop. Representatives of 3 community organizations and village offices emitted more rhetoric about a year-long tiff that seemed to be centered around allegedly confusing Fredonia laws, while a fairly new village law governing vendors has further clouded the issue. The dust up between the government and the festival organizers of Fredonia has many side issues, however. The only thing that really came out of the discussion, which gobbled up about 75 minutes of a 3-hour workshop, was a loose agreement to talk more. So Mayor Michael Ferguson offered to start a committee of festival organization leaders and village officials. The community organizers, Lauren Boyle of the Farm Festival, Annalise Brugichel of Fredonia's Farmers Market, and Larry Fiorella of Festivals Fredonia appeared open to that. There's been questions from all 3 organizations, said Ferguson, to open the discussion. He spoke of a lot of confusion, not only on everybody's part, including ours, to a certain extent, but the law has been pretty clear over the course of a number of years. Ferguson read the entire vendor's law of the village, which took 15 minutes. Police Chief Gregory Myers read a law governing Barker Common, which notes that no alcohol is supposed to be served without proper village approval. Civic events also can't be a disturbance. It can't turn into something that people are calling us on and complaining. Ferguson commented there is a misconception that once the board has approved the event, it has also approved the vendors. The vendors are the organizers' responsibility, he held. So Boyle said, I feel like there's a big difference between Susie's crochet pot holders that want to set up on a random Tuesday on her own in a park, and Susie's crochet pot holders that wants to set up under an event, an organization. I think those things need to be made a little bit more clear, that the organization is participating through an approved organization in the village. So, in other news, Chautauqua County is declaring sustainable disposable income growth, the #1 economic development goal for our country, for county government, This goal was adopted after a Democratic county lawmaker previously tried to make job creation the top goal. So in June, legislator Fred Larson of Jamestown introduced a resolution entitled Declaring Job Creation the #1 economic development goal. Instead of voting on it, Larson's resolution was referred to the Planning and Economic Development Committee against his wishes. So the legislator took up the original resolution again at its July meeting. And they're breaking tradition in Fredonia. The Fredonia Central School District has chosen to prioritize momentum over tradition with a shift for the end of school year. The Class of 27 commencement ceremony will be on the night of Friday, June 25th at sunny Fredonia, rather than on a Sunday afternoon as in recent years. Superintendent David Bradzilux announced the change at a recent Board of Education meeting. He said when raising the idea to the school community, the district received some backlash from people that were not open to change in tradition. However, the majority of the feedback the district received when pondering the shift was in favor of a Friday night ceremony. There you go. And we do have some deaths to report also in this issue. There was a Sandra Manos who passed away on July 14th. She was from Silver Creek. Michael Dermelville passed. He was from Florida, but I think he was born in Dunkirk. There you go. And he passed away on August 30th. No, can't be August 30th. It hasn't happened anyway. Oh, 25. Sorry, August 30th, 25. Vanessa Volk, of 74, of Fredonia, passed away on July 25th. And then there was a South Carolina bicyclist died after striking a vehicle. In Brockton, a South Carolina bicyclist has died after striking a parked vehicle last week. Chautauqua County Sheriff's Department reported Tuesday that about 2:59 p.m. July 22nd, they responded with Brockton Fire Department and Chautauqua County Emergency Services to Harmon Avenue for a reported motor vehicle versus bicyclist accident. An investigation found the operator of the bicycle, Michael McKay, 64, of Greenville, South Carolina, was traveling west when he collided with a parked motor vehicle. As a result of the accident, McKay died from his injuries. Now, here's to your good health. Dear Dr. Roach, I'm a 73-year-old female who has type 1 diabetes that began as type 2 diabetes more than 30 years ago. I have a very strong family history of coronary artery disease, and I personally have a cardiac stent. I use an insulin pump and have good control with carb counting. I struggle with my weight. I'm 160 pounds and I'm only 5 feet 2 inches tall, and with controlling my insulin dose. My A1C is 5.8%. I have ocular hypertension and some diabetic retinopathy. I receive Avastin injections in my eye approximately every 2 years. My physician has ordered Mounjaro for weight loss. My concerns are my diabetic retinopathy and the diagnosis of type 1 versus type 2 diabetes. What are your thoughts on the safety of starting Mounjaro? So, Dr. Roach says, type 1 diabetes is very different from type 2. Type 1 is often diagnosed in childhood or adolescence and is an autoimmune disease that attacks the cells in the pancreas, which make insulin. People with type 1 diabetes have very little to no insulin. People with type 2 diabetes make normal or even high amounts of insulin. With type 2 diabetes, the primary problem is resistance insulin. Insulin can be used, but newer therapies are designed to reduce insulin needs. Many people with latent autoimmune diabetes in adults are initially misdiagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I suspect that is your actual diagnosis. A diagnosis of LADA is typically made after age 30. It sounds like you have problems beginning around age 40. And there's no insulin requirement for at least 6 months, and blood tests confirm the presence of islet cell antibodies. People with LADA usually have type 1 diabetes. You have disease in both the small blood vessels. Avastin is used for diabetic retinopathy, a small vessel disease, and large vessels, the stent in your coronary artery, which can happen with either type of diabetes, but is consistent with type 1. There's strong evidence that GLP-1 drugs are helpful in preventing heart attacks in people with type 2 diabetes, but not for those with type 1. Your question is about the use of triazepam or Mounjaro when used for diabetes, for type 1 diabetes. Your A1C is in the non-diabetic range. I don't recommend new medication to lower your A1C further. So it seems like you'd be using it for weight loss. The expert opinion does recommend medicines like this for weight loss in people with type 1 diabetes who are obese, but your IBM doesn't meet that definition of obese. So there's a safety issue, and that even modest doses of Mounjaro could cause a drop in your blood sugar. Having an insulin pump, especially when combined with a continuous glucose monitor, can reduce this risk. But you do go on Mounjaro, you should pay careful attention and regulate your carbohydrate intake to avoid keratosis, which is ketones in the urine, which show inadequate cellular nutrition and put you at risk for diabetic keratosis. Wow. Okay, and then we have some other news. There was a shootout that killed 3 people at a food festival near Seattle Space Needle. In Seattle, there have been at least 3 suspects involved in a shootout at a crowded food festival near Seattle Space Needle over the weekend, police said Monday. One of them was among those killed in the violence. In a document filed in juvenile court in Seattle where a 15-year-old arrested in the case waived his initial appearance Monday, police said they believe there were at least 3 shooters. A 15-year-old, an acquaintance who died at the scene, and at least 1 other unknown suspect. Nicole Powell, the Seattle Police Department's Assistant Chief of Investigations, said at a news conference Monday afternoon that investigators believe the shooting may have been gang-related with 2 groups firing at each other, and the deceased shooter was 19. A judge ordered the 15-year-old held in juvenile detention for investigation of firearm violations and first-degree assault. The King County Prosecutor's Office said it expected to receive the case from Seattle Police on Wednesday for a charging decision. The gunfire erupted about 6 p.m. Sunday, and the waning hours of the White of Seattle, leaving the 19-year-old shooter and 2 others dead. At least 4 others, including the toddler, were injured. The annual 3-day festival draws hundreds of food and retail vendors and performs to Seattle Center, a sprawling park in the shadow of the Space Needle. Many attendees rushed into campus buildings or ran from the park at the sound of the shots, of course. Wow. And we're going to go on from here. Let's see. And here's an interesting little segment. It says, Today in History. So this is of Wednesday, July 29th. On July 29th, 1967, an accidental rocket launched on the deck of the supercarrier USS Forrestal in the Gulf of Tonkin resulted in a fire and explosion that killed 134 service members. Also on this date in 1836, the newly completed Arc de Triomphe was inaugurated in Paris. In 1858, the United States and Japan signed the Harris Treaty, formalizing diplomatic relations and trading rights between the two countries. In 1890, artist Vincent van Gogh, who was only 37, died of an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound in Auvergne, France. In 1914, transcontinental telephone service in the U.S. became operational with the first test conversations between New York and San Francisco. Then in 1921, Adolf Hitler became the leader of the National Socialist German Workers, that's the Nazi Party. In 1954, the first volume of J.R.R. Tolkien's novel, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings, was published. In 1957, the International Atomic Energy Agency was established. In 1958, President Dwight Eisenhower signed the National Aeronautics and Space Act, creating NASA. In 1981, Britain's Prince Charles married Lady Diana Spencer in a glittering ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral in London, and then they got divorced in 1996. In 1986, a federal jury in New York found that the National Football League had committed an antitrust violation against the rival United States Football League, but the jury ordered the NFL to pay token damages of just $3. In 1994, abortion opponent Paul Hill shot and killed Dr. John Bannard Britton and Britton's escort James H. Barrett outside the Ladies Center Clinic in Pensacola, Florida. In 1999, a former day trader, apparently upset over stock losses, opened fire in 2 Atlantic brokerage offices, killing 9 people and wounding 13 before shooting himself. Authorities said Mark O'Barton had also killed his wife and 2 children. In 2016, former suburban Chicago police officer Drew Peterson was given an additional 40 years in prison for trying to hire someone to kill a prosecutor who put him behind bars for killing his 3rd wife. Wow. So in other news, there was a charges against a city man. It was the 4th in 2 years. Charges announced Monday against a Jamestown man charged in the May 3rd stabbing death of Torrey Kenny, are the latest in a list of criminal charges in recent years. A secret indictment issued by the Chautauqua County Grand Jury was unsealed in Chautauqua County Court, charging 27-year-old Robert Brinkley with 2nd-degree murder, 1st-degree manslaughter, a 3rd-degree criminal possession of a weapon, and the May 3rd death of Jamestown resident Torrey Kenny, who was 32. Chautauqua County District Attorney Jason Schmidt called the incident a brutal and predatory attack committed without justification. Kenny was unarmed and fearing for his life when he was stabbed through the eye and collapsed on the street during the early morning hours of May 3rd. Within minutes of the call, Jamestown police began their investigation with very little evidence and information from the crime scene and devoted countless hours from then on developing the case until we were confident that it was ready for prosecution, Schmidt said. Brinkley pleaded not guilty to the charges, and a conference has been scheduled for August 17th. County Court Judge David Foley set bail at $1 million cash or the alternative $2 million to be secured by property bond or the posting of 10%. If convicted of the charges, Brinkley faces a prison sentence of between 25 years and life. So in June 25, Brinkley was taken into custody after city police officers responded to a report of a domestic incident on the east side of Jamestown. While no domestic incident actually happened, Brinkley had pending charges of first-degree robbery and petty larceny. As officers began to place Brinkley into custody, he allegedly pulled away and tried to run from the officers. After a brief struggle, he was placed into custody. Then in May 25, Brinkley was charged with first-degree criminal contempt, third-degree criminal mischief, and third-degree assault after officers responded to a reported fight on the east side of Jamestown. When officers arrived, they learned that one of the men involved in the fight had an active order of protection against the other man. So Brinkley also allegedly threw a rock through a person's window and hit a woman in the head, causing injury. On July 24th, Brinkley was charged with first-degree assault, first-degree burglary, fourth-degree criminal possession of a weapon, and first-degree escape after officers responded to an east side home to help parole officers with a stabbing victim. Officers alleged Brinkley stabbed a person several times in the head, causing multiple severe cuts. The person was taken to Chautauqua County for evaluation and treatment. Officers then conducted a warrant check for Brinkley at a north side home and report finding Brinkley inside an apartment. He was taken in custody, and as officers were taking him to the city jail, Brinkley ran away from the officers. In all three incidents, Brinkley was taken to the city jail until he could be arraigned. So this man obviously got out because he wouldn't have been able to charge that guy on May 3rd. And they put him in jail. It was a good place for him. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Dunkirk Observer on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. So, there were some insults at the correspondent dinner, Kel Thomas said. President Trump's performance at last Friday's retooled White House correspondent dinner made me nostalgic for the days of Vice President Spiro Agnew, President Richard Nixon's media attack dog. In his speech, Agnew called politicians critical of Nixon administration policies nattering nabobs of negativism, a phrase written by his speechwriter William Safar and later absurd by media to apply to journalists. That was mild compared to the disgusting personal insults Trump hurled at journalists who were at the dinner to support the White House Correspondents Association Scholarship Awards for young journalists and to honor reporters who uphold the principles of free speech and write the truth under often precarious and dangerous conditions, penning stories of fact that Trump doesn't like. In case you were watching something else or reading a book and you are fortunate, you did miss his hour-long speech. Here are just a few lowlights of what in the previous generation would have sent someone to use such language to the kitchen sink where grandma would have washed her mouth out with soap. I hate some people, said the president. He has claimed to be a Christian. Many of his evangelical supporters believe him to be one. It's not judgmental to ask if hating others is reflective of normal Christian behavior. Trump was just getting warmed up. The meandering speech was, as usual, frequently went off script, got personal. The jokes, such as they were, fell flat. Even his administration's psychopaths found it difficult to yuck it up in the face of so many insults. He compared the really beat-up faces of UFC fighters with those of Bette Midler, Jane Fonda, and Bruce Springsteen. He also singled out Senator Adam Schiff, Rosie O'Donnell, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, former New Jersey Republican governor, Chris Christie, whom Trump has mocked before over Christie's weight struggles, and retiring Republican Jerry Nader. As the New York Times put it, the president wasn't telling jokes so much as he was repeating attack lines one hears at a standard MAGA rally. At least he shook hands with the award winners, including those he previously labeled fake news, which is one of his milder insults. What may have been his only positive statement of the evening, when he wasn't praising himself, the president thanked the Secret Service and law enforcement for the great job they do. That earned a round of applause, not for him, but for them. I wrote a book a few years ago that contained a chapter on some of my printable hate mail, calling me names rather than presenting cognitive arguments, Opposing my positions didn't change my mind. Some who have written to me with respectful disagreement get a reading and usually a response. Sometimes I see the point of their position, and sometimes I have agreed with some of them. If you've been called names, did it change your mind? Probably not. Polls show most journalists vote for Democrats and are politically liberal. Republican Ronald Reagan and George Bush were good examples of how self-depreciating humor disarmed the journalism critics. Look up their remarks as previous White House correspondents' dinners on YouTube. Trump seems incapable of self-depreciation because he is a malignant narcissist, believing the world revolves around him. Count the number of times he uses personal pronouns. He rarely says we or they, giving credit to others. Saying good job doesn't count. At some point, even people who agree with many of his policies, like me, grow tired of the crude language, the vile insults, and the repetition of lines we have heard countless times. So I turned off the TV 15 minutes into his speech. I suspect I wasn't alone. So this man is called Carl Thomas, and he is a syndicated reporter, or syndicated creator. So there's a Dunkirk Senior Center. They have a program schedule. The Dunkirk Senior Center has planned a number of activities for the next 3 months. And on Sunday, seniors will travel to the Erie Station Dinner Theater for Chicago Speakeasy. The all-inclusive price is $99. So beginning Tuesday, the Office for the Aging will present nutrition classes on Tuesday from 10 to 11 for 4 weeks. To register for the nutrition classes, if you want, you can call 716-753-4582. And there is a line dancing every Tuesday from 10 to 11. A phone and table class is planned for August 19th at 10 a.m. Bunko game night is set for August 24th from 6 to 8. On August 27th, a Victorian Princess Luncheon Cruise featuring options of the casino or the Mill Creek Mall, and it's $99. On September 16th, an outing to the Corning Museum of Glass will cost $150, which includes lunch. On September 30th, there's an all-inclusive trip to the Frankie Valley Tribute. Oh, what a night! At Batavia, and it'll cost $139. On October 10th, a Christmas in the Shaker Woods, Columbia, Ohio trip is available for $99. On October 12th, join the Grove City Outlet Mall, get a jump on it Christmas shopping trip. Store prices are 75 to 90% off. That's $99 and it includes lunch. You could travel to Lancaster, Pennsylvania from October 21st through 23rd for the Sight and Sound Theater featuring Joshua. Included are premier tickets, deluxe motor coach meals, gratuities, luggage handling, and so much more for $569 double accommodations through White Star Tours. So if you have questions about that, you can call Robin at 716-366-7530. And we also have some area police reports. So let's see what's going on. In Ellicott Police, Michael Newman, 45 of Faulkner, was charged with first-degree menacing with a weapon and second-degree harassment on July 21st. After officers responded to a disorderly person, Newman was allegedly waving a hatchet around and pouring lighter fluid on the apartment floor, threatening to burn down the building. Nice guy. Newman was charged and taken to the Chautauqua County Jail for centralized arraignment. Newman will be in Ellicott Town Court later. There was a Jesse Pardue, 30 of Bemis Point, was charged with first-degree attempted grand larceny and second-degree obstructing governmental administration. So on July 28th at 12:29 a.m., Ellicott police responded to a report of a despondent man. Alleged Pardue made threats to kill a police officer and to harm himself. Pardue reportedly fled the scene on foot and failed to comply with law enforcement before allegedly trying to steal a vehicle while fleeing from the officers. An arrest warrant was issued for Pardue, who was then taken into custody later that evening. Pardue was taken to the Chautauqua County Jail for centralization. Pardue will be in Ellicott Town Court later. So Bryce Simmons, who was 18, of Jamestown, was charged with second-degree reckless endangerment, a second-degree criminal possession of a forged instrument, driving while intoxicated, driving while intoxicated with a BAC of 0.08% or more, driving while intoxicated under 21 zero tolerance, and other traffic violations on July 25th at 6:32 a.m. Police officers responded to report domestic dispute in progress where it is alleged Simon was involved in a verbal argument with a person. And during the dispute, Simon allegedly got into a vehicle and began to drive down the road while intoxicated with the other person in the car. Simon then stopped the vehicle in the middle of the road, got out, walking down the road and leaving the scene. According to a police report, officers found Simon in the area and through investigation determined he was under allegedly the influence. Simon was also allegedly in possession of 2 forged state driver's licenses. Simon was processed and released with traffic tickets and an appearance ticket to be in Ellicott Town Court later. Jamestown Police. Marshall D. Kelsey, 33 of Jamestown, was charged with 4th-degree felony grand larceny at 3:13 a.m. Tuesday after officers responded to an address on Jamestown's west side for a domestic dispute. Through an investigation, it was found that Kelsey allegedly stole property from the hands of a woman. Kelsey was charged and taken to the city jail until he could be arraigned. Then in Lakewood Bus Day, the police, Thomas D. Mather of Bus Day, was charged with second-degree harassment at 12:30 p.m. Saturday after officers were dispatched to Big Tree Road for a report of a neighbor threatening to kill the caller's pets and other people there. Mayer was charged and taken to the Chautauqua County Jail for centralized arraignment. He will be on Bus Day Town Court later. Justin Shearer, 31, is charged with petty larceny, 7th-degree criminal possession of a controlled substance, and 3rd-degree burglary at 9:50 p.m. Friday after officers were dispatched to Walmart for a report of a shoplifting in progress. Shearer and a woman allegedly attempted to leave the store with $282 in stolen merchandise and their bags and clothes. The pair were reportedly stopped by Walmart asset protection officers, and Officer Shearer was also allegedly in possession of a white powder substance identified to be 77 grams of methamphetamine. Shearer also had allegedly been previously trespassed from all Walmarts. Shearer and the woman were taken to the county jail for centralized arraignment. And then Chautauqua County Sheriff's Office in North Harmony, Cameron D. Johnson, 35 of North Harmony, was charged with second-degree aggravated harassment at 2:56 p.m. Monday after deputies responded to an address at North Harmony for a report of a disorderly man. Johnson allegedly threatened to damage property belonging to another person, so Johnson was taken to the county jail for centralized arraignment. So that is the news for this week from the Observer. And you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the current issues of the Dunkirk Observer. We read from the Dunkirk Observer every Saturday at noon. Your reader has been Marge Lauber. I thank you for listening, and I hope everybody has a great day.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of our Northtown Bee papers, which includes Amherst, Clarence, Cheektowaga, Depew, and Lancaster. At 2 o'clock, we have our Southtown papers, which is the Orchard Park Bee, East Aurora Bee, West Seneca Bee, and Hamburg Sun. Following that, 3 o'clock is the Ampole Eagle. Stay with us. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a